Hi friends, welcome to Benchmark Unit 7, Week 2. I am Ms. Cosmos and this is going to be our Wednesday writing workshop. So today we are still working on our historical narrative. We are still working on a plan, but this is going to be our plan part 2. So hopefully last week you were able to go ahead and fill all of this out. Now, what I ended up doing was I chose to write about Henry Shack. He is a worker. My title is Working on the Railroad, and I'm choosing to set my story between New York and California. Now, my problem is that Henry is poor and wants to move his family out of the city. So they live in New York, and he wants to get enough money to move them out of the city and maybe get a farm or something. The solution at the end of the story is that he works for the railroad and makes enough money for his family. So for my beginning, remember, these are just one sentence answers here, just kind of getting your ideas together. So in my beginning, Henry leaves New York and goes to work in California. Now, I chose California because I know from reading Building the Transcontinental Railroad that there was a railroad company, the Central Pacific Railroad Company, that started in California and moved their way east. And that's where I wanted Henry to work. So he is, for my middle of the story, Henry works on the railroad going from California to the east. And this is the Central Pacific Railroad Company. And then in the end, Henry earns enough money and buys a farm for his family. Now, this is what I'm going to be working off of. Hopefully you have yours and it is filled out nicely so that you can use your information to now build the second part of your plan. Now, some non-negotiables, some must-haves, something that you need to think about. When you are writing your story, you are going to have an introduction of your main character or characters. Maybe you have two buddies working together. Maybe you have two businessmen working together. You could have one main character or you could have multiple main characters. You have to have details that tell the reader what the setting is, so where it's taking place, and the time period or the dates, okay? When is this all happening? So you have to have details that are going to explain that, and this usually happens in the beginning part of your story. Your story will have to be 3 paragraphs correctly structured. So that means we need indents, and we're going to want to shoot for about 4 to 5 sentences for each paragraph. Your story also has to have a problem and a solution. If you think about any story you've ever read, most of them have a problem or something the characters have to overcome. And then there is a solution or an ending at least that wraps it all up and lets you know how everything turned out. It's not always a good solution, but it is a solution that tells us how the problem either ended or was solved. So these are the things that you have to have. So get yourself a lined piece of paper, and at the top, you are going to label it Historical Narrative Plan Part 2. You're also going to want to have your name first and last in the top right corner. And the date. You're going to put the date. Your date might be different than mine, depending on when you're watching this video. Now, don't freak out, but we're going to do 3 chicken feet. If you don't feel like you want to scrunch everything up, you can put it on the front and the back, or you can have 2 papers. But you will have to have 3 chicken feet, and our 3 chicken feet are going to be for our 3 paragraphs. Now, you're going to have an opening, okay, for the beginning of your story. This will be the beginning. Then you're going to need a transition sentence that takes us from the beginning to the middle of the story, and the second chicken foot is the middle of the story. and I'll explain more about this later. Then you're going to have another transition sentence that gets us from the middle to the ending, and then your last chicken foot is going to be the ending of your story, and then you're going to have a wrap-up, something that's like a good ending that we're just like, this is how it ended, and everybody feels good about it. Okay? So I'll show you what I have for mine. So in my opening, Henry comes home and there isn't anything to eat. I've seen a lot of stories like that. If you have ever watched the movie Charlie and the Chocolate Factory or Willy Wonka's, the older version, it's something very relatable. So Charlie, he's poor, he comes home, his family's all kind of cramped in their little apartment. It's something that you can easily imagine if this is the type of story that you're writing. So Henry comes home and there isn't anything to eat. I chose to say that his mother is sick from working in the factory because I know that during the time of the Industrial Revolution, where there were a lot of factories and a lot of people were in the city and they were building the railroads, this was not a really great time to be a worker. It was very, very difficult, hard work. It was dangerous, and you didn't get a lot of money for doing it. So I know all of these things from my past experience in reading other stories and watching movies, that his mother, I'm going to choose to make his mother sick from working in the factory that she's working at. And obviously Henry wants to do something about this. So maybe he comes home and he says that he's heard of a job opportunity. I'm sure that these companies, these railroad companies, were advertising, trying to hire a bunch of people. So maybe he found a flyer or he heard about it from a friend. Notice that these are not necessarily complete sentences. They're just ideas, but I'm laying out my ideas on paper in order. So his mom is sick. Henry says he's heard about a job opportunity. I don't know where yet, but I'll figure that out when I start to write my story. So Henry packs his things and goes to California. How does he go to California? Well, thinking about that, Henry's poor. So I had to come up with a way that he could go to California because I know from reading Building the Transcontinental Railroad right here, it says that before the railroad was built, it used to cost $1,000 to go across the country. So if this is before the railroad was built, I don't think Henry would have had $1,000. So how's he going to get there? How did any of the workers get there? I had to go back and look. There were some things that told us, let's see, so in Rail Tycoons, it said that it was horse and wagon trips. So, and then if you look down here, I think it even says it again. Yeah, see, races a horse-drawn railroad car. So a lot of these, I'm getting some clues that maybe before the railroad was built, people used horse-drawn carriages and stagecoaches and things like that. So maybe he couldn't afford to go on one of those, but maybe he had a friend or somebody who owned one and maybe cut a deal with him that if he would like carry the bags and like do the work and things like that, he let him ride along with him. So that's how I'm going to have Henry getting from New York to California. And it makes sense because that's something he would have had to maybe have done because he was poor, right? He's not going to be able to pay for a luxurious trip and just go, right? We had to come up with that. So then Henry arrives and he looks around and I put details. You've got to have details. What does this look like? So maybe there's a lot of people living in tents because it's not like there was a city there yet, right? People are just coming and there's not a lot going on. So we're talking about camps and tents and people just camping out on the ground. All of these people, they're there to make money. They probably don't have a lot. So maybe just a sleeping bag on the ground. So then he gets a job and starts to work. They blast through a mountain. Now, I know about this because when we read, it said that the Central Pacific Railroad Company, they were going through mountains. And I know I've read stories and I've heard songs and things about blasting through the mountains. I've seen movies that have that on it. So they're blasting through a mountain, and that's dangerous work. So my transition is that in the blast, someone gets hurt. Now, I'm not going to make this all, gory and crazy, right? We're going to keep it school appropriate, but it's something that maybe could have happened. Somebody gets hurt, and Henry maybe takes their place or takes their job. So then Henry is offered a position on a special team, because I know that they had a special team, and that team was offered 4 times the amount of pay, 4 days pay, for each day that they were able to lay a bunch of track. So maybe that's the team that Henry gets on, and that's how he pays for his family. So he gets on this team, they lay lots of track and get paid a lot of money. The railroad is finished, and Henry goes home. Henry tells his family that he's earned enough to buy a farm, and then my wrap-up is that they move out to the farm, his mother gets better, and they are happy. That's my ending. So it's all here. I've got it all planned out, and this is all that I'm doing for today. I'm not putting it into paragraphs. I'm not coming up with all of the details of my story. It's just my plan. So this is what you guys are going to do, okay? I want you to have 3 chicken feet. I want you to have your plan of how each the beginning, the middle, and the end are going to go. And then I'd like you to have a transition sentence. So a sentence that gets us from here to here. How does it happen? How are we transitioning from beginning, middle to end? And then your wrap-up sentence. Like, so the very last line of, and they lived happily ever after, or however your story ends, okay? So this sentence, after we read this sentence, we should feel like the story's over, and we're pretty good with it. It's a good ending, and we know that the story's done. All right, guys, so you can choose to work by yourself, you can work with a friend, or you can work in your groups. You can have the same thing. You can all write the same thing. You are coming up with it together. When you are done, please take a picture of your plan and upload it to Canvas, and then you are done. Thank you for joining me.